Thank you so much to you. My name is Mery Rodriguez. I am an advisor in pedagogy and communications for the Chief of Party of the government delegation in the dialogue table for the government and the ELN in Colombia. I guess that when you are what now is known as a pra-academic, a person that actually does academia and practice, but mostly practice in my case, you have a life which is full of ethical dilemmas and things that you have to think 2 times or 3 times or 1,000 times about, and how to deal with them, and how to be sure that you are do your work in highly ethical standards. One thing that comes to mind right now is a research that I started doing back in 2019, late 2018, and lasted until 2022 actually, with the people from the LGBTQ plus community within the Department of Meta, which is in the eastern part of the country. This work was done mainly within the historical memory and then transitional justice realm. We were producing a report, if you call it, of sorts, about the stories of at least 15 people from the LGBTQ plus community that have been victimized in one way or another within the Colombian armed conflict. When we started doing this, we have the idea. I was hired by a international corporation entity, and they said like, oh, the only thing that we want is to have like the life stories of 15 people, and then so go interview them and then write a report, and then it will become a book. And when I started doing that, I realized that that's not what you should do, that you don't get to places, interview people, write their stories, and then publish them. That is not appropriate and is not respectful with their lives. So I created a whole process of talking to people, doing workshops to understand what was happening on their territories, and the differentiated ways in which they have suffered violence, not just because of the diversity of their gender expressions, gender identities, and sexual orientations, but also because of the way in which each sub-territory within the big territory had different armed actors present. So the type of violence that a paramilitary group will exercise over a group of LGBTQ plus community people will be totally different than the type of violence that a guerrilla group will do. So we had to actually understand what was happening to be able to talk to people. And from that moment on, late 2018, to the next 3 or 4 years, what happened was that we created a relationship in which we actually accompany them to write all the reports for the transitional justice system, at least 2 of them. So one was historical memory, then we put together a report for the Truth Commission, and then we built a report for the Special Jurisdiction for Peace. These were 3 different types of mechanisms and types of research that we needed to do in order to build each one of the reports, because they were thought to serve different purposes. So historical memory was about recognition of victims. The Truth Commission was about understanding the way in which violence happened to people in specific territories and because of particular identities, and in this case LGBTQ plus. And the Special Jurisdiction for Peace one is about trying to understand the dynamics in which the victimization happened, to be able to actually hold accountable the people that actually committed these crimes against the population. And doing this during all these years, there were many different instances in which we have to decide what was the best way of acting. Particularly for the historical memory and the Truth Commission report, things that we had to come across, and one that was very important to me was, I must say, I'm going to talk about the one in historical memory, that if you wanted to be really inclusive about violations that LGBTQ plus community live within the highest parts of the armed conflict in the Meta department, you had to include the violence of the former combatants themselves. And that wasn't an easy decision to make. And when we asked the former combatants to actually become part of the group, that we hold workshops together and travel around the department and have these discussions together, is how do you work with the diverse identities that people have within the conflict themselves? Because what was common to all of them was the diversity of their sexual identities and their gender expressions and their sexual orientations, because they were all not non-heterosexual. However, in the same group, you have people who are former combatants and victims of guerrillas. And at that point also we had people that were victims from the paramilitaries and the legal forces. So the first part of the dilemma was, how do we allow former combatants to be part of this, and why? So we hold some conversations specifically about that with the people that were already part of the group, and we decided that it was important to have their voices. And then how do you manage that? Because of course there are ways in which they present themselves, and they are not only going through this understanding their victimization as LGBTQ plus people, but also they are going through the reintegration process, and they have to fulfill certain rules, and they have to speak truth, and they have to do certain activities, so they do the reincorporation process properly. And so holding the balance within this was a very difficult thing. And then it's how do we prepare to actually have this group of people together to talk about their experience as victims of homophobic violence, basically, on all trans violence and all these different types of violence against LGBTQ plus people. And this was the primary reason to be there, and to have these reports, but without not recognizing the fact that they belong to a group in which people was victimized for so many other reasons. And it's so getting to that decision was really, really hard. It is like, are we re-victimizing? Are we doing harm? How do we define harm, and how do we prepare for anything that could happen within these conversations? So
how did you address that?
Well, we study a lot. I went back to the books, and I read a lot, and I talked to psychologists, and I actually learned about first aid, psychological tips and things like that. And we hold independent meetings first, and we lay down the rules of the engagement pretty clearly. We were like, these are the things that we can talk about, and these are the things that we are not talking about. And in here, you cannot deny the victimizations that the armed groups have done to people in the civil society. You know, it is like, we understand that you are going in through a reintegration process, but that doesn't take away the fact that people were victimized in their municipalities and in their daily lives for their sexual orientations, but for many other reasons too. So, they actually work with us and work very hard with us to understand those rules, and they committed to them. So when they became part of the big group for the workshops and for the conversations, they were into understanding and respecting those things. But they also started becoming, I wouldn't say friends with the civil society victims, but they started to get acquainted, and when they started talking to them about their experiences, they also asked for the possibility of explain the rationality and to tell their stories and to say, why is it that I decided to be with this group, or I was force recruited child. Or so when stories started to happen, it's not that they justify the fact that the group they belong to actually exercise violence against people, but there was some sort of reasoning that allowed the civil society victims to start understanding what happened to them. And that made the conversation richer. Nobody denied anybody's victimization, but nobody was denied the space to speak about their realities more than truths.
Okay.
The lives that they have lived and the reasons why they have lived those lives. So that was a way, I mean, like being prepared, studying a lot, talking to experts, and then have facilitated conversations that do not happen in a 2 hours workshop. This is a relationship that we built over many years, and be able to actually be with them. I mean, this, for me, one of the biggest challenges that need to be overcome in general terms with research is that we cannot be parachute researchers, you know? So you just do a couple of workshops for 2 hours in a week, and then you have 10 hours of workshops and 40 hours of interviews, and you're done and you leave. These are processes that you have to be there to accompany, and you have to be next to your phone when somebody calls you and asks you a question about something they're feeling or they're thinking, or, you know, because we are going to the core of what had happened to people that have lived violence within the armed conflict, and you cannot just open wounds and not be ready to actually accompany people to close those wounds, or to at least start understanding the nature of this and looking for resources that can help them walk that through.
Okay. What are in your experience, that is for like 20 something, almost 30 years, as a researcher, as a teacher, what are the most common mistakes that happen during field work, and what do you recommend to avoid that trap?
Well, the first one, I think I've already mentioned it, which is to become parachute researchers, in which you just plan a very detailed field work of a grand total of 10 days, which is all that you can do because that's the grant that you had given. And then you try to have as many interviews and as many meetings and as many focus groups that you can on those hours, and then you just live, you know, and I think it is a dilemma that is very certain. I mean, it's real. It's not that, you know, we have a lot of resources to do standings of stay for months and years in a place, but you should have a close contact with the communities that you're going to go to way before you actually get there. And this is not just your contact person, not just your point person. It's actually learning the story. Is going 2 or 3 times before you go to do your the bulk of your research is going there, understanding how you get there, understanding the value of things, understanding the culture and the behavior of people. I think one of the most common mistakes is just getting there, doing a couple of interviews and leaving. I think it is disrespectful to people. And actually, another common mistake is actually generalizing. Another is demeaning the experiences of people, because many researchers have had the opportunity to visit many places and in many countries, and to think that that a group of people that actually have survived a genocide are more suffering than a group of people that were internally displaced, and to say like, oh well, but that's nothing, because when I went to whatever other country they have gone to, you have to. So it's sometimes researchers tend to actually compare the realities of the places that they have been at, and then within the research generalize on grounds that actually led kind of the most important part of our work out, which is the story of human beings that have suffered incredible amounts of violence, and that have lived things that are unique to them. And I understand that because of the nature of the research, particularly academic research, in which you just have to publish and you have to give numbers and hypotheses and thesis and all these things. You tend to actually generalize, so you can be more publishable, because then you are more, you will be reached by more people. I think that's a huge mistake, to actually compare one reality to other, in terms of dequalifying the experiences of victimization that people have had. And the second is that you tend to then to publish to generalize with not real grounds of understanding within the context in which that violence happened. So and then the third one is like not giving back what you have learned. I understand that you are not going to give back your paper or your thesis or your 27 graphics with graphs with the significance of this or that and X and Y graphs and things like that. I understand that's not the way that you give back, but you have to create a way of giving back somehow. You have to translate part of your dissertation or your thesis. You have to go back and have a workshop and to talk to people. You have to send to an email, but it's not just sending your thesis in English, or in whatever other language you speak, but actually being sure that people get at least recognized by being part of the work that you have done there.
Okay.
So that's important too.